Welcome back. And today we are gonna be talking about my final thoughts.
谁人在背后教我口舌？
Okay, wait, let me mute bro a little bit. Cerydra literally says that, like, who is talking behind my back? And then I'm literally like, yeah, today we're gonna be talking about our final thoughts. After spending 500 hours on Leo, bro, quite literally testing her with every single DPS in the game, playing through every single endgame content, try out with every single Eidolon investment as well as Lycon investments, and that is gonna be the culmination of the only guy left, that Blaze HSR, if I can get to my shit right. So this will be the final thoughts on Cerydra, right? My raw thoughts.
Yep.
First things first, Cerydra has given rise, right? Given a rise to a brand new phenomenon known as the partner plus situation back in Pridewind HQ, where she is a really niche character, like a very niche support, because she works only really truly exceptionally well with, I'm guessing, Phynon and Anaxa, right? And to a certain extent, that is definitely going to be true, because she's not going to be as synergistic compared to a lot of the other DPSs for our version 1, version 2, as well as version 3. In fact, she really reminds me a lot with Jiaoqiu. Back when Jiaoqiu first launched with after Acheron's release, Jiaoqiu was like the best in slot support for Acheron. But if you really wanted to run Jiaoqiu on like a secondary team, like for example, back then people were running Jiaoqiu with Argenti, Jiaoqiu with Yingli, because technically he did have the ultimate damage vulnerability. So your other discount ultimate damage units, they can still kind of work with Jiaoqiu. And Cerydra is also not gonna be an exception, because if you have seen our little findings over here with all these things, right, the only ones that really failed were like Qingyuan, Topaz. Yeah, that's pretty much it. Qingyuan and Topaz were the only two DPS that could not achieve a Memory of Chaos 12 clear within 5 cycles. Every other DPS, to a certain extent, you are able to still clear. Some of them better than the others, but most of all, the benefits are still there. It's just that it is absolutely true that her skill damage, right, all of her buffs, they are fundamentally all tied to your skills. So for example, if I'm going to be using units like, which is for example Qingyuan as well as Topaz, their damage being tied to your summons, which will have 0 benefits from your skill damage, is going to suffer by a lot, right? That being said, I did see some interesting synergies with Cerydra outside of the usual skill damage champions that we're going to be seeing. Skill damage units that we're going to be seeing. Notably, for example, Firefly, right? The E2 Firefly, honestly, I think that was really shocking. To be fair, my Firefly was not E2, but if you do have an E2 Firefly, if you would run her sustainless, because of the mechanics that you basically duplicate your skill, the whole break system relies on you dealing toughness bar damage as much as possible. So if you're going to be running an E2 Firefly, which every single hit is going to be dealing substantial break damage, especially if you have, for example, E1 Rame, E1 Fury, all that kind of stuff, it will help you achieve that weakness broken state at a much faster pace while adding on the additional turn you're going to be getting from the break, which is going to be E2 Firefly. So for that, I think this was honestly a very nice little team over here. For other stacks, for example, in version 2, Acheron and Fei Xiao, I think Acheron's damage you guys have seen on the showcase is not relatable. Generally speaking, you're probably not going to be seeing that big of a damage increase, especially if you're not going to be getting like some crazy-ass Acheron. It's really mainly just there for the stack generation for Facel's ultimate as well as Acheron's ultimate. Unfortunately, Cerydra's buffs, they have absolutely zero impact on ultimate damage, aside from the 24% attack, so it ain't what it ain't. I would say this is still not that bad, but under normal situations where you already have units like your Jiao Qiu, you have your Cypher, you have your Reverse Seal for Acheron, and for your Facel, if you're going to be still sticking with Bubbin with like Cat, a car, with your new Aventry, there really isn't too big of a reason to consider running her alongside with units like Acheron and Facel. Then a lot of other units that actually do rely on skill, for example, Jingliu, for example, Scylla to a certain extent, right? For example, maybe not so much Yunli, but for example, like Dihera, these other skill damage champions, they are still okay, but it's less synergistic compared to, for example, a Nexa and Phynon, namely just because you are still able to have a very nice uptime with, for example, Scylla's burst is not just from her skill, right? Scylla's burst still comes from her actual ultimate. Jingliu, likewise, aside from her enhanced skill, her ultimate still deals a quite substantial chunk. Same thing can also be said for Dihera, which is going to be relying on the 42 cells of interpretation. Mighty is also going to be an example. But all these things being said aside, right, the one important that I've noticed with Cerydra, outside of these kind of users that use the skill, is that it basically duplicates their energy regeneration as well, which could see some very interesting gameplay. So for example, because we do see a duplicate for Scylla, you could cast a skill twice. This means that you are able to reach your ultimate at a much faster pace, and getting Scylla's ultimate to proc like one more resurgence can be extremely beneficial, which is how we even get ourselves the 4-cycle clear despite being completely off, and I mean with the power soul and all that kind of stuff, right? So it is what it is. And then other units like, for example, I'm going to talk about this separately because I think DOT was super fucking good. Dorsal Ratio also don't release the skill because his damage is going to be tied to his follow-up attacks, but because he can slam on the duplicate skills, you are able to get a much faster energy outtime. She is almost like a energy battery like Sunday and Tingyun, but indirectly, right? An indirect energy battery, because a duplicate skill is gonna always equate to 30 energy. And if, for example, the unit that you're using her with is gonna be running on energy regeneration, you're able to get off a very fast energy charge time whenever you use the skill duplications, which honestly to me, I think that was quite interesting. But unfortunate thing is, even though the buffs are gonna be tied to your skill damage, if you're gonna be using units that deal damage outside of skills, you're gonna see a pretty big drop off, which is why for reasons like your Jingyuan as well as Topaz, even though they get more energy, because their damage is all fundamentally tied to your summons, like for example Lanlord and Topaz, you're not gonna be seeing too much, right? Lingsha on the other hand, I think this was quite interesting, where we basically ran a crit DPS Lingsha to, I think her each skill, they're like 350k against the AoE targets, which was honestly very nice. Even though the actual damage from the bunny was very low, but it was still something that could still see some play. And Lingsha did run the energy regeneration rope, which means the ultimate is gonna be very high, and she is basically like the DPS pseudo hybrid, right? So that is gonna be that, right? And then one last honorable mention before we really move on to the actual current version pick is going to be Kafka. I think Cerydra paired alongside with Kafka as well as Eidolons, it was like one of the better synergies I've seen. I will honestly say top 3, right? Top 3 being alongside the DOT triggers. Maybe it might be because of the current memory of chaos environment. You do have the free burn effect, which means that DOT is getting shielded to the absolute high heavens. We'll see how the performance is going to be next time. But the additional duplicate on Kafka's skill, where you can cast the skill twice, not only does that give you the double DOT trigger for both the main target and the adjacent target, you also get your ultimate a lot faster. And nowadays, you are already running Kafka with energy regeneration rope. You are going to be running her with 4-piece ego. You're going to run her with tutorial. It means that Cerydra plus Kafka, you are often able to achieve this one-turn ultimates with like extremely fast uptime. Paired up with ego 4-piece and the amount of follow-up attacks you're going to be getting because you're casting your ultimates a little more frequently, the DOT frequency was absolutely fantastic, right? So this was honestly very nicely done. I am looking forward to see how this is going to be like going forward to the next cycle. Honestly, it really just stems from the fact that she duplicates skill and give her the indirect energy regeneration. Whether or not Kafka gets a skill damage increase is completely irrelevant. She was still able to do a very nice skill. Oh, this was like super small because we're not going to talk about it. So going forward into like another chapter, right? Like for example in version 4, if we're going to be able to see another DOT unit getting raised, I literally can foresee a world where we're going to be running Kafka, Eidolons, DOT plus Cerydra. It might literally be possible. But that being said, I would never ever pull Cerydra just for Eidolons. It's more so like if you already had Cerydra and you feel like, okay, you know what, I'm feeling a little bit silly, I want to play Cerydra outside of the normal final and final team comps or another team comps, you could try running her up with high sentence to see some very, very interesting results, right? So other than that, I wouldn't really, because they're basic girlfriends. Right, so I just want to see the interactions a little bit more. Other than that, let's go on to the final set of the units over here, which is gonna be our version 3 big boys. First of all, unfortunately, I think Cerydra with Cashface could honestly cook a little bit. It's just that Sarah, we don't have our here, so the stat generation was a lot slower, especially comparing Gallagher with Hyacinth, right? So final, I don't think it needs to be said, right? Once you get the you can feel the difference with final himself, so that's pretty much it. And Anaxa is definitely gonna be the definitively easiest, one of, if not the easiest way to play. Insane skills, insane damage, insane booms, absolute cinema with a sustain, very nice. Other than these, I would say that one of the more interesting picks from version 3 is going to be from Mr. Mighty. I think you can see our Mighty is literally broken with Cerydra. That was a combination that I did not expect. So I'm not sure if this is an actual bug or if it's intended, but essentially what's happening is Mighty gets a free skill on top of the God Slayer duplication. So usually you should only duplicate the skill once and that's it. But for some weird interaction, if you are able to duplicate Mighty's God Slayer, he actually gets off another skill like the King Slayer after the double God Slayer. So you are literally giving him like 150% value compared to every other DPS, which is only getting 100% value, right? So that was super interesting. In fact, we actually did manage to get a 0 cycle. I think the video should be coming out very soon. But that was one of the more interesting. And this is also, keep in mind, she is completely 0 buffs to a HP scaling DPS like Mighty. You can see over here, Mighty with Sunday and Qing Liu with Sunday. These two are also clearing 4 cycles despite both of them being a HP scaling DPS, right? Kazuris, I'm like I mentioned, if this had I wouldn't be surprised if we see a 3 cycle over here. So whether or not the DPS is HP scaling, I don't think it's really like the end of the world. It is more so how synergistic is she really for your skills to get the additional proc as well as the additional 30 energy from the skill duplication. If it synergizes that well, where you want your units to cast your skill more often, you want to cast your ultimate more often, for example like Kafka, whether or not you buff their attack, buff their crit damage is inconsequential compared to whether or not how much a unit actually wants that skill, right? So Mighty is one of the perfect examples why I thought it was like, oh my god, it's absolutely insane. Hopefully miHoYo doesn't fix this, or like if it was intended, I don't really know. But as of this date, what was the time? As of the 3rd of September, this is 100% still working as of now, right? So that's pretty much it. And then for our Fate collab units, Archer and Saber, unfortunately, Archer is just way too broken, but to be fair, this was done with a sustainless. With a sustain, I would say it's probably not going to be that crazy because this allowed us to get an insane amount of burst by getting on our skill point issue with Sparkle. If you were to run Archer with a sustain, Sparkle is pretty much non-negotiable. So without Seal Wolf here, I would foresee a scenario where you're probably going to be clearing with like 2 or maybe even 3 cycles with Archer because the rotation here is going to be feeling a lot slower, right? So it's probably around the same ball by Saber. Honestly, Saber was also not too shabby, but unfortunately, Bubbin is just way too synergistic with Saber with the additional action advance. So that is gonna be that. And lastly, I'm guessing for D Herda, the unfortunate circumstances is to a certain extent, if I want to compare D Herda with units like your Mighty, I literally found more synergy with Mighty than D Herda because the thing with Mighty is that your God Slayer multipliers is like the exact same. Same thing for your Anaxa, right? D's multipliers are the exact same when you let them go, but D Herda suffers from an unfortunate fact, which is the interpretation stacks at the very first enhanced skill, it goes away. So even though you duplicate D Herda's enhanced skill, the second enhanced skill, it literally does like 25% of the original damage compared to a full-on 42 of interpretation. So it's a huge damage drop off. So even if you were to give D Herda the enhanced skill, the damage share was just simply not worth it. So I would say that if you were able to get units like your Teep or your Bubbin, it's probably going to be a lot better compared to your Cerydra over here, right? So I think with that pretty much sort of wraps up every single one of the possible teams that we're going to be running with Cerydra. And it brings us to the biggest question of them, which is, should you even consider pulling for bro, especially if you are going to be playing her outside of units like Final, right? So me personally, I think I've also said it before in my Eidolons video, if you have an E2 Final, Cerydra's pull value is honestly really not that crazy because currently as where it stands, you can't really make use of the extra turn after the enemy's dice. Is like very small, so perhaps consider waiting for a rerun, right? This is one of the few cases where I say right now it is really just not needed if you already invested all in E2 Final. Waiting for a rerun in like the next couple of months, or when she eventually comes back, or she goes into the shop, right, the free shop, and she becomes like a free unit, you can consider that again, because let's just be real, HP inflation, power creep, all those things are going to be happening, especially as we are going to version 4, right? And speaking of going into version 4, that is probably one of my biggest questions, which is what the hell is Evernight and Dunhane going to be doing? by the time this video goes up, I believe the live stream is going to be roughly slightly more than 1 week away from coming out, which means we are going to be able to see Evernight and Dunhane's kit next week, during the time when Cerydra's banner is still live. So, frankly speaking, if you are anything but a final or an XR user, unless you really like them, I don't think there's an urgency to pull her right now, because you kind of want to decide if Evernight and Dunhane can offer a potential higher value for Cerydra. Because the good thing about Cerydra, that even though her kit is very straightforward, it's sort of like a double-edged sword where you either really want her, or you can just kind of skip her. Little bit like Hyacinth. Hyacinth is also like, okay, if you don't want to play DOT, there's really just no reason for anyone to be pulling for Hyacinth, so you're not going to be running Hyacinth as a debuffer, and same thing for Cerydra. You know, all of those different team ones that we have tried, we did see some fun interaction, we see a lot of like interesting synergies, but at the end of the day, it's really just more like for fun, and we want to use her outside of the original comp that she was intended. Other than these things, I don't think it's going to be that big of a concern until eventually when they announce Evernight as well as Dunhane. And because the way I like to structure my pools in Honkai Star Rail, and I think structuring your pools in HDR is like so important, because this game has no parry, has no negative edge, has no dodge or whatever the fuck, right? So it really just depends on who are the cards, who are the champions that you have in your roster to bring into battle, especially as we enter into 3-team endgame content. So as we are already about to reach the end of version 3, right? Version 3 is really, oh my god, time flies, guys. It's already September, guys. Version 3 is about to end. We are already going towards the tail end, and version 4 is probably going to be beginning to around 3 to 4 months. This means that when I look at the banner for HSR, I don't just want to look at Cerydra, I don't just want to look at the DPS she's working with now. I'll look at, is there a potential where she might work with even more DPS down the line? An excellent example being like Sunday's position, right? This is not really the last patch for version 3 yet, but Sunday and Field, they were both excellent examples of who is a DPS that has a little bit more to do going forward in the future. Do you want to be a Sunday where she works very well with Jingyuan, but back then Jingyuan was not a tier 0 DPS, but at the same exact time, Sunday made a lot of version 3 DPS right now perform to the best of the capabilities. So at launch, he was probably nothing too crazy because Acheron was dominant, Super Break was dominant, and everyone was putting field for Super Break. But after time goes by, and because Sunday synergizes way more with this newer DPS, and Field is basically nowhere to be seen because Super basically fell off, it really depends on what the future landscape is going to be like for Cerydra, right? So for this case, unless I am absolutely positive that in the future we're going to be seeing more skill duplication units, because I've proven so far, it doesn't have to be HP scaling or attack scaling or whatever scaling. As long as you gain value from duplicating skills, you are definitely going to be able to use a little bit of a bonus with Cerydra. So for that regard, I'm definitely way more conservative because we are going to be going to the end of version 3, right? And after Evernight and Dunhane, I also like to look at the lore in HSR, which is, that is going to be 3.6. Elysia, Cyrene. And I believe that we have really played this story since like 3, but they have really hyped up Cyrene for like a really goddamn long time. Very similar to how, me personally speaking, the marketing budget for a company is directly correlates to how relevant the unit is going to be in the meta, at least for the time period, right? Maybe some exceptions, for example, if you are support, generally speaking, you're going to be getting a very nice lifespan. But for example, take a look at, for example, Firefly, right? Take a look at your characters. These girlfriend units from version 2 and version 3, they do have a very sizable roster of performance for endgame content, as well as future units that can actually supplement them, right? Finon, Kevin Castana, you know, going through the 33-minute cycles, and now he's gonna be getting a dedicated support such as Cerydra. So, because of all these relations to the actual story itself, I just refuse to believe that Cyrene is gonna be like a side grade or like a inconsequential unit that players don't need. So I really want to try to at least maintain a little bit more going into the Cyrene patch, right? So that is gonna be my personal opinions and whether or not you should be pulling for Cerydra. If you are already gonna be pulling for Cerydra, I think Ezio is completely fine. I think I run her more times with DDD than her Synergy Icon, straight up, because DDD is just that absolutely bastard of a unit, especially if I'm gonna be going up against units like Savrok, right? The action value delay, you don't have enough action value, DDD is gonna be very helpful over there. Other than that, the event icon is also gonna be completely fine, but I just found myself using DD way too frequently, right? Other than this, I think the E1 is a very nice damage increase, but also nothing too game breaking. If you want to say Ezio, I think that's honestly completely fine as well. And Tracers makes out everything. Relic, Sekros, Luxaga, or Runway, whatever is gonna be very easy to build, right? And as that, we are gonna come on into our final segment, right? Our final segment. I think it is pretty clear that Cerydra ever since her leaker days, right? Ever since her leaker days, ever since we haven't seen her launch, and then her actual launch itself, she is a unit that has seen a lot of pushback from the community. And rightfully so, because we see what happened to Jiao Qiu, which is Jiao Qiu has been a very, very niche and nice, right? Nice and niche support for Aggron. But even if you're that niche to a DPS, it will not guarantee the fact that a next version support can be even more niche, even better for that said DPS. So, Cerydra, as of where she stands, she's definitely not as general compared to units like Tribi and Robin. And that's sort of like the beauty of like whether or not you're like super generalized or like super niched. If you have an option to detach yourself from a DPS, that will give you a little bit more chance to reuse them in the future, because DPS change just like that, right? They really change super frequently in these turn-based games. And supports, if they are gonna be like, okay, if a DPS is a ship, right? And if the ship is sinking, will your support be able to keep itself afloat by going into another ship? Or will your support go down the ship itself? Because that is literally what happened with Super Break, right? Super Break being Fuke. Fuke was absolutely insane for Super Break. But the moment Super Break starts to go down, right? The moment the Super Break ship starts to sink, you find it very difficult to detach Fuke from Super Break and try to fit her into anywhere else, because she was built to be super niche to Super Break, right? Whereas if you want to use her as a alternative support, she is not going to compare as strong compared to the general supports, right? Your general supports like your Babin, your Treep, and even Ranmei as a general support is still more general than a niche support like Fuke. So with this regard for like Fuke as well as Jiao Qiu, players are absolutely justified thinking, okay, if Cerydra right now is a super niche to find on, right? Rather niche to Anaxa and every other unit she can use, but probably not the best in slot. What if in the future Phyton falls off? What if Phyton falls off? Or what if Anaxa falls off? Or what if they don't fall off and they introduce yet another support unit to replace the Cerydra slot? At that point, what else do you take? Because Sunday is gonna be super general, right? You can run Sunday with like a Phyton, but you can also easily take Sunday away and run into another hypercrit DPS. But if another super niche support comes in and removes the role, which is the value you're getting from Cerydra's skill duplication, then she's gonna be homeless. You know, look at Sparkle. She was homeless for like 10,000 years until they literally dedicated a free DPS unit to make the best use of Sparkle's kit, which is Archer, because originally she was used for E2 Deal, except E2 Deal like Sunday even more than Sparkle, right? So there might also be a situation, and at the end of the day, it really just is about speculations, and I don't think there's any point in chasing meta, because first of all, there's not Uma Musume, there's not a PP game. If you don't clear, then just don't clear. But most of the time, unless you are absolutely a tourist and just don't play the game, you really shouldn't be having that bit of difficulties with your endgame content and HSR, right? So whether or not you absolutely want that investment for whether be it your final, your next, or whatever it's going to be, I think Cerydra, it really just depends on how far are you looking into the game itself. So for example, my free-to-play account, like my bot free-to-play account, I didn't pull for final. I have a Nexa, but my Nexa is perfectly fine running Sunday. I don't have a Babin, so it is what it is. And it's gonna be a little bit more troublesome for my Bob's 3-team endgame content. But the thing is, 3-team endgame content is not my main concern anyways. Because I really only have that main 2 DPS, which is Dherda and Castris, right? Maybe if I want to run my day, I get that Sunday, I could be pulling Cerydra just for a Nexa, and that would do my free-to-play account very good, right? So I can do run like Castris, Teep, Sunday, my day, and then like Cerydra and Nexa, right? I could do that, but because my pools are always very limited, and the moment you spend your pools, they're gone forever. And a free-to-play will never save up that amount of pools ever again, because the income is always going to be a little bit less able to keep up with 2 banners back-to-back in a single patch, especially if you use of 50-50s, right? So that is pretty much my 2 cents as to the whole Cerydra situation and the controversy and everything. If you have her, that is absolutely fantastic. If you don't have her, I don't think it's the end of the world, right? Units like, for example, Teep, Babin, Sunday till this day, there are no such thing as the best DPS in the world. There are only such thing as the best support with the best DPS, right? So I have come to the end of my final thoughts on Cerydra. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Word of the day is going to be... Holy shit, your stream is so good at yapping, bro. Goddamn, right? Join Discord, join our page for all of our enemy. Use code for them, all the best. See you guys next time. Take care. Holy